So the wait is finally over. After weeks and weeks of umming and ahhing and will they, won't they, the election has been called and Labour have won a majority. So in this video, we're going to be asking one critical question. Do the plans that they have cut the mustard, and will they be sufficient to get the UK economy going again? I've spent the better part of 15 years, virtually my entire career, working in the world of finance and working in the world of economics. So we're going to start with Labour's proposal for a national wealth fund, initially capitalised with £7.3 billion to invest in the UK economy, specifically to support growth and invest in clean energy. But right off the bat, I've got to say, this is a disappointing start. And that's for a couple of key reasons. The first thing is, although £7.3 billion sounds like a lot, when we are talking about underinvestment in the tens or hundreds of billions over the last decade, I think this is not a great start. To give you an idea, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund has 1.4 trillion in assets under management, and Denmark's National Pension Fund has got about 150 billion. And so that's really one of the key differences between the UK and some of the Scandinavian economies who have these large sovereign wealth funds, is the UK basically used a lot of its North Sea oil reserves, despite producing similar quantities of oil. The UK used a lot of its North Sea oil reserves to just give tax cuts to big companies and people who were not really going to miss the money. But the Scandinavian countries have mostly taken some of the vast money that they made and invested it for their future. So right off the bat, I think this, unfortunately, is going to be a sign of things to come. Unfortunately, they're just not off to a great start. It's a good idea, but the scope and the scale is just not necessarily there, I don't think, to make a meaningful difference in the economy. The next is infrastructure and housing. So low-key, I think this could be a really good idea. So this has got kind of a few prongs attached to it. The first is that Labour are going to come up with a 10-year industrial development plan. This is going to mean that home builders and developers and private investors and public investors have got much more certainty about what's coming down the pipeline, rather than year-to-year targets or month-by-month decisions that are being made, having a 10-year strategy. Because if you're a large company and you're investing billions in a theme park or a drug production facility, then having that certainty is going to be an absolutely key and fundamental part of ultimately why you decide to make your decision. So low-key, I think this is a good start. The thing in my mind that really levels this up is some of the changes that are being made to the planning process. Now, we all believe that the UK is a glorious country with green rolling hills and fields abound and watching lambs play in the springtime. But the truth of the matter is, it's quite widely reported, and there's plenty of evidence to support this, that the UK planning system has been responsible for really gumming up economic development. And then on the house building front, this is a bit of a mixed bag. So Labour have said they are going to build 1.5 million new homes over the course of the Parliament. Now, the Conservatives set themselves a target of 300,000 homes a year. 300,000 times a 5-year government is 1.5 million. So the truth of the matter is, Labour are not actually committing to build any more houses than the Conservatives were going to. But one of the key policy points that they've made a point of talking about is they're going to change the planning system in kind of a fundamental way. It's going to be assumed that provided it meets all sorts of criteria, provided it meets all of those criteria, it will automatically get approved. And this is really a key difference. One of the real weaknesses with the UK planning system is that it's done on a case-by-case basis, and so you get these very unequal outcomes. So on the housing and planning front, a mixed bag. I think if executed right, it could be a really good thing for the economy, and I think overall I would give that one a thumbs up. Next is GB Energy. So this is going to be a publicly owned energy provider in order to introduce competition in what is increasingly an industry that is controlled by a handful of very, very large firms. And you know what? I think the idea is sound. It's quite difficult to come up with a meaningful criticism to setting up GB Energy. And we are at this juncture again where it comes to scope and scale. Initially, it was going to be a £28 billion per year investment. It was shrunk down to 28 billion over the course of a 5-year parliament, and has unfortunately shrunk down again since. But the question we've got to ask ourselves again is this of the scope and the scale necessary to make a meaningful difference? I will concede the rather vaguely named economic stability. So I think it's fair to say, after the Truss debacle and all the chaos that ensued after Brexit, one of the things that Rachel Reeves, the incoming Chancellor, has said is that she really wants to focus on stability. Now, Labour are basically betting that there is potentially hundreds of billions of private money that is out there, which they want to make sure gets directed in the direction of the UK. And I think that's a good thing. But there's a problem attached to that, which is, what do you have to do in order to attract that money? And I think that's really where there's some degree of uncertainty. And she has referred to this as securonomics, but I think the truth of the matter is that it's insufficient. To give you an idea, when Joe Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law, that had a price tag of $500 billion, which is about 397-ish billion pounds. The Labour Party are planning to spend 4.7 billion. And so whilst having security is going to attract private investment, I think the problem is that if that money takes too long to arrive, then the UK economy will just continue to slide further and further, and it's conceivable that the economy will need more decisive action more quickly in order to get things going again. They've also talked about the New Deal for working people. This has a plethora of policies attached to it, but we'll just go through some of the main ones. This will include things like banning 0 hours contracts. This will include benefits for investing in training and investing in technology. All of this is a good thing, and for the most part, it speaks to something that I have been talking about endlessly on this channel, which is worker productivity. Labour productivity in the UK has just completely flatlined for literally a decade now. And I think anything that they can do to incentivise companies to invest in their workforce and to invest in their labour is unequivocally a good thing. And I think the last one is, again, we find ourselves discussing this, is Labour's attitude to Brexit. So there's a bit here. We obviously have a free trade agreement in place with the EU. It has all sorts of flaws, which I'm not going to go into. But one of the things that Labour have talked about, and one of the things that they've kind of said implicitly, is they're going to go for sector-by-sector trade deals. And I think this is going to take a little bit longer to get across the line, so I have concerns about the timing and the amount of effort necessary to get them there. But I think this could be one of really the key deliverables that is going to help the economy. So a good example might be mutual recognition of professional qualifications. If you're a qualified accountant in the UK, then that qualification should be recognised in France and Germany and Spain. That would be a really good start. Agreements on touring. The complexity of getting equipment and personnel across onto the continent in order to be able to tour is vital for young musicians. So an agreement there would go a long way. And I think if you take some of the largest sectors in the economy, again, the UK has quite a concentrated economy at the end of the day. We are 80% services. Of those, professional services is a decent chunk, financial services is a decent chunk. And so there is some low-hanging fruit there. But my concern would be, as I mentioned, how long will it take to get those agreements negotiated? So what do I think in conclusion? I think there are some really sound, really solid ideas in the manifesto, and indeed policies that have been discussed publicly. But I have two primary concerns. The first is a question of timing. Some of this stuff is just going to take a long time to get through. Negotiating anything with the European Union is going to take a long time. Overhauling planning reform, whilst you might be able to get the changes across the line reasonably quickly, the amount of time between those changes getting implemented and that having investment decisions for private or public money, that could potentially be years. And then the other thing, which I have real concerns about, is the size and scope. Now, as we've discussed, Joe Biden has been spending vast sums of money in order to transfer the US economy to more renewable sources. And I think that is invariably the problem. Labour are planning a great deal on there potentially being lots of private money out there that wants to come to the UK, but they've hemmed themselves in by saying that they're not going to borrow any additional extra money and that they're not going to raise the primary taxes, income tax, national insurance, VAT. So that's my concern. Some of this stuff might just take too long for us to feel the real benefits of it. And the ones where they do have hardcore policies attached to them, it just feels as though the scale and size isn't necessarily there. And that's the thing. In order to attract the kind of investment and rejuvenate the economy in the way that they have outlined that they really want to do, they're going to have to be bold, they're going to have to be transformative, and they're going to have to act quickly. But failing that, in this next video, link just here, we're going to be talking about what do Labour really need to do? What are the policies that Labour will really need to adopt to have a transformative effect on the UK economy? We're going to be going through my economic policy wish list in this video just here. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you like and subscribe.